Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 6th of July, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that by calling 1-800-472-0391. That, of course, is the Alaska Weather Information Line. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, and once you click on that, you'll be taken to your local forecast office, River Forecast Center, or Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. You can always email me if you can't find what you're looking for or have some suggestions about what you'd rather see or how that site should work. One of those would be the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit page. I'm passing those suggestions on to the folks there at the Aviation Unit, and they're working hard to get everything ready for you. Email here is david.snider@noaa.gov. If you like, take a look at the Weather Unit page. It is going to change substantially on July 14th. Already that page is up to view at weather.gov/AAWU. The old site will still work until the 14th, but after the 14th it's going to change. Now they pushed the date back so that we could work in all of your tweaks and suggestions that needed to happen so the page could work for you no matter what part of Alaska you're in. There's also a mobile site that's in development now, and that should work a lot better for low bandwidth connections and also just a regular old use on your smaller device instead of on a PC or Mac. So make sure you take the time to explore the links, the maps for the PIREPs and TAPs and other forecasts before you need them. Of course, that date again is July 14th. If you like, on that page, when you head there, you'll be able to see this email. But send us your suggestions there and comments, good and bad, we can take it. nws.ar.awu.webauthors@noaa.gov is a place to go. Now, if you've already been to the website, you probably know that there is a small stream flood advisory posted for areas generally north of Cape Krusenstern and the tributaries of the Noatak and Kivalina rivers. That's going to go until 1:45 tomorrow. Some of the remote reporting sites there have indicated that there could have been as much as a half inch in the last about 3 to 8 hours now. While that doesn't sound like a whole lot, it does sound like that the stream levels could be coming up quickly in a few spots. And with rainfall continuing, at least until midnight or so, those rises could come up quickly if you're not paying attention. So be careful where you're camping. If it's time to head out into the woods or out close to the stream, just be prepared for some of those rapid rises as they might catch you off guard. And remember, never cross floated roadways or ditches there, as that water could be coming up, and the bottom of that might be a lot different than what you're used to. So just be careful. Turn around, don't drown is a phrase we like to use there. So a flood advisory for the areas around the Kivalina and Noatak rivers until 1:45 tomorrow. So a little bit on the unusual side for that, but worth paying attention to. In the meantime, if you notice where the rain has been falling and where the fire danger was this morning, perhaps that's good news. Need a little bit of water to tamp down some of the drier conditions as of late. Levels for fire danger have come up across parts of the interior Seward Peninsula and all the way into the middle Yukon Valley and the Koyukuk Valley and the upper Yukon Valley. It's a little bit lower as you head down towards southwest until you get into the Yukon Delta there, generally north of places like Newtok and Bethel. Now across the northern coastal plain, it's also dry there. Looks like generally extreme conditions, and we're starting to see the return of drier conditions across parts of the Copper River Valley and also across the Alaska Peninsula. The good news is there has been a lot of cool and wet weather across a large part of south central as of late, and conditions are going to return to that as we head into the overnight hours and over the weekend. So the chance that extreme fire danger is going to return anytime soon is probably pretty low, but it's always worth watching there. And in the interior, conditions remain relatively dry. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and the visible satellite is what we have up for you first today. Low pressure sitting across the southern and eastern Gulf, pulling in moisture across southeast, but watch as this spins. It's really pretty ragged. It's incorporating a lot of dry air, and there's not a big surge of moisture with this for southeast. A lot of it is staying offshore. The next chance of moisture is coming up in this section here. that is also being drawn northward with the jet stream. So it does have some upper level support, and that is going to bring a lot of this moisture back into southeast as time goes on. In the meantime, you'll notice a lot of dry and warm air across the interior. That's what's creating all these little pockets of bubbly clouds there. That rough and scaly appearance tells us that we have convection, rising air in smaller pockets, and that can create the showers or the thunderstorms that you're experiencing in places in the interior today, and also across parts of the Alaska Range and south and west of Northway. West and south of Arctic Village, we also have another section of showers and possibly even a few thunderstorms today. We'll see if that expands in coverage as we go on. Out west, the clouds look substantially different. This is more of a stratus deck, the low flat clouds that are capable of producing a little bit more of a steadier precipitation rate. We usually just call it rain instead of showers or storms when that happens. Out west, you can see the circulation that's driving more cloud cover northward of Adak and Shemya and into Unalaska. That southerly flow continues though, and that warm and wet air is traveling well north into the Arctic this afternoon. On the infrared satellite picture, you can get a little better view of what's going on up north, and pay attention to what you see here over eastern Asia. The resolution is pretty poor because this is on the very northern edge of our satellite scan that's shooting from the equator. So not a very good look at what we're seeing, but it does tell us something's on the way, and that is a cold front. Colder air is dropping in from eastern Russia, and as that works its way southward, it'll probably stall into a frontal boundary stretching all the way across the Kamchatka Peninsula, the north slope of Alaska, and onward into Arctic Canada. That will trap a lot of that cold air from moving any further southward, but it will also be a boundary for winds to form along and for clouds and precipitation to hang up on. And that looks like it's going to stay there at least for the next several days. So we have warmer air running northward, and that's combining into a zone of confluence or convergence with that colder air up north. And what would you expect? Well, probably more rough weather across the open waters of the Chukchi Sea and also into the Beaufort Sea. So watch for some changes there, especially along the coast where there still remain some pockets of ice. Out west, low pressure will be working its way slowly north and east. It's going to focus some of the stronger winds across the central chain. None of them look to be too bad, though. Maybe some higher end small craft advisories. And low pressure across the Gulf of Alaska will sit there and just kind of fizzle out as we go. You'll see several waves, though, working across the map as we look at the surface charts here. So today, well, a few showers and thunderstorms out there across the interior. High pressure is really trying to set up across south central and the northern sections of southeast. Low pressure, not that low at all, 1,010 millibars by comparison. So we compare the low and high. Some days the numbers are high, some days the numbers are low, but it's all in relation to what you see on the map at one time. Low pressure across the Pribilofs, 1,004 millibars there. Areas of light rain for the Seward Peninsula and also across the central and western chain, and some pockets of rainfall just north of the Arctic coast. As we get into tonight, you'll notice some areas of rain across the eastern Aleutians, showers northward through the Bering Strait, and a slightly stronger pressure gradient here as that colder air tries to drop southward into the Chukchi coast. That's really about as far south as it looks to get in the next couple days. High pressure is going to hold across the north and eastern Gulf. Low pressure scoots to the west. You'll notice that number's coming up. That tells us that pressure center is filling in. This area of disturbed weather is getting weaker as that number climbs, and high pressure really isn't changing that much, so it's holding ground just fine. Showers probably in the region, so again, that dirty ridge concept. Moisture has made its way under that area of relatively stable and warm air, and we're having trouble flushing out that moisture to get a purely sunny day across south central and even parts of southeast. So good luck. It looks like clouds are moving back in tomorrow. Better chance of showers in the early morning hours, and that should improve. So all of tomorrow doesn't look like a washout for sure, but the back half of tomorrow looks better than what we'll see in the morning for those of you watching the weather in south central. For southeast, there will be some areas of light rainfall in the region. Nothing too substantial it looks like right now, but again, that residual moisture we saw working its way northward across the eastern Gulf is going to creep into your region a little bit more. Out across the west, the Kobuk and Noatak Valley still looking wet there, so remember we're watching for those small stream areas around the Kivalina River and the Noatak rivers to maybe come up a little bit more. That small stream flood advisory continues until 1:45. That's about the period that we're saying there could still be some trouble in those regions. Low pressure across the western Aleutians at 989 millibars is moving a front back into the southern Bering and approaching the Pribilofs there. The rain should probably move through, and visibilities may stay down through a little while during the morning and midday hours for the Pribs. Up north, you'll see that front again just kind of hovering right across the Arctic coast, but it isn't really making a big surge southward. For now, low pressures moving a lot of southerly winds up through the Bering Strait. You may actually get into some clearing across the YK Delta and across the northern coastal plain and the Brooks Range. Look for some more sunshine there, but south of that, through the Yukon Valley, through the upper Kuskokwim, through south central and into southeast, it looks like showers and even a few storms across the eastern Alaska Range, maybe even the Copper River Basin. Conditions will be wet and gloomy as we go into Saturday, and that should probably continue for the southern half of Alaska, at least as we go through Sunday, maybe into early Monday as well. So if you didn't get a chance to use the sunshine today, make sure you watch for it briefly tomorrow afternoon. Temperature-wise, today's been a warm one. Places like Cake made it up to 72 degrees, about the same there as the capital city today. Sitka was 61. Hyder, it was easily 70 degrees, probably warmer just in the last hour. Lower to mid-60s across southern parts of southeast. In Prince William Sound, Whittier was a much cooler 56, but Cordova and Valdez are in the lower 60s. Same goes for Seward and Homer. Kenai, 61. The population is probably exploding there right now. Lower 70s across Anchorage and the Matanuska and Susitna valleys. Talkeetna was 74. And as you get up toward Big Lake and areas just north of that region, it was about 80 degrees. So a lot of heat across areas away from the water. Lower 80s around the Richardson Highway, Tok, and Northway up toward Eagle. It was 85, 82. For Fairbanks and Tanana today. For Yukon, also pretty toasty at 82 degrees. 60s and 70s as you head up toward Anaktuvuk Pass in the Arctic Village region. 63 for Kaktovik, 75 degrees at least today around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. It was 57 in Barrow, and southward toward Atkasuk, 52 in Wainwright, and a slow roast in Kotzebue Sound. Temps back in the lower to mid 50s there for Kotzebue, 52 in Shishmaref, 50 in Nome today. Unalakleet was upper 60s to low 70s, 76 in McGrath, a warm one in Bethel at 64. Around Lake Iliamna, we saw temps in the upper 60s today, 58 in Kodiak, lower to mid 60s around Pilot Point, Point Hayden, and down toward Chignik. Looks like Sand Point was 54. Cold Bay and False Pass also in the 50s today, with the central and western chain in the 40s and 50s. St. Paul and St. George upper 40s. Overnight lows are going to stay mild from the upper Kuskokwim all the way through Tanana, the middle Tanana Valley itself, Northway and Eagle up toward Fort Yukon, where we could see a low as warm as 60 to about 61 degrees southward toward Fairbanks and North Pole. The North Slope in the 40s and 50s, also mild tonight. Again, remember that colder air is lurking right about here, but never really seems to make it all the way in. 40s and 50s for the Kotzebue Sound region. The YK Delta just shy of 50 degrees for most of the coastal locations. Upper 40s for our friends in the Alaska Peninsula. South Central close to 50 degrees, a little bit cooler inland, and southeast in the lower 50s tonight. A mild night for you, with highs tomorrow back in the lower 60s for many. Haines and Skyway close to 64. Prince William Sound, you're looking at lower to mid 60s there. 67 around Talkeetna, Anchorage, and the Matanuska and Susitna valleys. Homer and Seward closer to 60 degrees, and upper 50s for Kodiak. As you get north of the Alaska Range, temperatures should once again skyrocket into the 80-degree range as you head into the afternoon. It'll be a very quick warm-up during the morning, just as it was today. 83 in Fort Yukon, north side anywhere from the mid-50s to mid-60s. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, maybe even Atkasuk, looking at temps easily in the 60s tomorrow afternoon. Nome 57, looks like Russian Mission, Grayling, all the way down toward Bethel could reach into the lower to mid-70s. Coastal locations, though, could be a solid 10 degrees cooler, and that includes Bristol Bay and Dillingham in the lower to mid-60s, with 50s closer to the Pribilofs, the Aleutians, and the Alaska Peninsula. On to flying weather. Things look pretty good across the interior all the way into southeast. MVFR conditions will lurk close to the southern end of the Kenai Peninsula, Kachemak Bay, and maybe Kodiak Island. Look for areas of MVFR close to the YK Delta coastline and the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula, but everything west of that and possibly around the Noatak valleys and the Kivalina watershed, you're looking at IFR conditions to start the day. Look for some improvement up north, MVFR, as you hover into the afternoon and across the south and western coast. Also all over Kodiak Island, and look for increasing MVFR across central and northern sections of the southeastern panhandle. Your pass conditions for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, though, will remain at VFR flying tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we've pulled out the threat for showers and thunderstorms there. Rainy Pass, also not looking for thunderstorm activity tomorrow. VFR conditions there. Windy Pass, though, may see that develop in the afternoon. Same goes for Isabel Pass with a VFR day. Otherwise, Mentasta Pass, we expect VFR conditions, but convection in the afternoon. And Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR flying through all all of your Friday. Portage Pass looks pretty good. BFR there. Out over the Sound and BFR conditions, and we'll see that develop over Chilkoot and White Pass during the afternoon there too. The freezing levels, not much change since yesterday, but if you look really carefully, there's the surface freezing line. There is cold air just offshore of Alaska. It wants so badly to drop southward, but it can't because we have that solid southerly flow working up the west side of Alaska right now, and with that comes freezing levels as high as 12 to 14,000 feet across the central chain and as high as 10,000 feet across most of the YK Delta. For southeast, your levels are between 8 and 10,000 feet. For the North Slope, as low as 6,000 feet and as high as about 10,000 feet in most areas. South Central between 8 and 10. Icing potential is still limited to the way up there levels, above 10,000 feet. So most of you are not going to run into trouble with this. Light to isolated moderate is what we're talking about. If you do happen to go that high, widely scattered showers or thunderstorms generally along and north of the Alaska Range and south of the upper Yukon Valley. As far as the jet stream goes, we still see these smaller ripples in that main flow that's crossing the North Pacific. The levels there reaching about 100 knots or so as this wraps into the Eastern Gulf, and that's what's grabbing that next surge of moisture and running that across the Eastern Gulf and into South Central. Up north, we also have another decent jet stream right now, around 65 to 90 knots north of the Alaska coastline, and that's what's powering that colder air toward the Chukchi Seacoast at this hour. Southerlies continue at 9,000 feet. Those winds, they're between 20 and about 30 knots or so, pretty much due south, and that's grabbing a lot of that heat we saw and sending that northward with a chance of rain all the way into the Chukchi Coast. The winds there south of Adak around 50 knots or so across the Eastern Gulf, about 20 to 30 knots over southeast. And inland winds are coming up slowly over south central, 10 to 20, but once you get into the middle Tanana Valley and northward, they climb into the 25 to 50 knot range across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. And at 3,000 feet, winds are coming up as well, 30 to 50 knots at this level from the west and southwest. Over southeast, considerably slower, 5 to 10 knots here at the 3,000 foot level. And we have southerlies working up the west coast, anywhere from 15 to 35 knots, and a little bit more of a northerly push coming across Bristol Bay right now because high pressure is anchored across the western Alaska Range. Watch for widely scattered showers and thunderstorms tomorrow north of the Alaska Range once again. The Chukchi Coast and into the western Beaufort Seacoast below 3,000 feet. Watch for developing and increasing areas of turbulence, some of that reaching occasional moderate across the western Brooks Range and the Seward Peninsula, and watch for chop across the Alaska Peninsula and parts of the central and eastern chain below 3,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'm back with a look at the sea ice edge and your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Lyra the Harp. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. The Summer Triangle is riding high throughout the sky for the next few months, and this week we're going to talk about one of the constellations that makes up this very popular grouping of stars.
That's right, James. We're going to give you a guided tour of the constellation Lyra the Harp. Let's show you. Okay, we've got our skies set up for any night this week at about 10 p.m. your local time. If you look toward the east, you'll see a grouping of stars we call the Summer Triangle. The brightest star in the triangle is actually the fifth brightest star we can see from Earth, and its name is Vega.
Vega is the star at the top of the triangle, and that's where you can find Lyra. The next brightest star in the Summer Triangle is Altair in Aquila the Eagle, and the third brightest is Deneb in Cygnus the Swan.
Lyra is often said to be the small harp that belonged to Apollo and was later given to Orpheus. Orpheus was so skilled at playing the harp that the music was said to charm anyone who heard it, even animals.
Indeed, when Orpheus played the harp, he could even charm inanimate objects like trees and rocks. Furthermore, when Orpheus joined Jason and the Argonauts, his music was said to muffle the songs of the dreaded sirens, whose voices tempted the Argonauts.
Quite a few cultures saw this grouping of stars as a harp. In Wales, they refer to it as King Arthur's harp, and in Persia, they called it the lyre of Zura.
Lyra is also known as Praecipe Salvatoris, the manger of the infant Savior. And to the Incas, they saw it as Urcuchule, a god in the form of a llama who watched over animals. Of the 25 stars that are within the boundary for the constellation Lyra, 5 of those stars are bright enough to be visible with the naked eye from most cities.
The brightest one is, of course, Vega. Vega's blue-white color tells us that it is much hotter than our own yellow-orange sun. In fact, compared to our sun's temperature of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, Vega blazes away at a fierce 17,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Vega is also considerably larger, for while our sun is a little under 1 million miles wide, Vega is almost 3 million miles in diameter, which makes it easy to understand that if we could place our sun and Vega side by side, Vega would shine 58 times brighter than the sun. Near Vega, there are 4 stars that make a parallelogram. Traveling counterclockwise from Vega, we have Zeta Lyrae, Delta Lyrae, and the 2 on the far end are Sulfat and Sheliak.
As far as statistics go, the stars in Lyra are quite impressive. Zeta Lyrae and Delta Lyrae are both binary star systems. Zeta is 156 light-years away, and Delta is approximately 1,100 light-years from us. By comparison, Vega is very close to us at only 25 light-years away.
My 2 favorite stars in the parallelogram are Sulfat and Sheliak. Sulfat is 2,400 times as bright as our sun and is at about 620 light-years away. Meanwhile, Sheliak is over 26,000 times as bright as our sun and has a surface temperature over 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit and is 960 light-years away. Sheliak was also mentioned in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, so I'm really happy about that. One last thing about Lyra. Did you know that the sun and all the planets in our solar system are heading towards Vega?
That's right, James. Our solar system is racing towards Vega at the incredible speed of 12 miles per second. And even though Vega is only 25 light-years away, at this speed it would still take our sun almost 500 million years to reach Vega.
Well, that's good. I'd hate for us to get an intergalactic speeding ticket. Besides, when we get there, what is there for us to do?
Well, you could play the harp.
Oh, yeah.
There's always something to do when you keep looking up.
A constant theme from this show over the last several days has been that southerly, warm and wet wind that's been coming up the western coast. As that's wrapping into the North Slope, it's chewing away and moving around a lot of the ice you see here across the northern community coastlines, but it has brought enough ice back in toward Point Barrow that you won't see a sea forecast when we get to the North Slope waters here in just a few minutes. However, the seas remain generally, or somewhat open anyway, around Kaktovik and the eastern Beaufort Seacoast and certainly southward there. However, it looks like the coming days you'll still see some changes around Point Barrow, Barrow to Wainwright especially, and then eastward as this higher concentration ice moves around quite a bit with the winds that'll be developing in the region. Here's a look at southeast. Winds remain fairly light the next couple days. In fact, they'll go very light south of Sitka tomorrow. As you get into southerlies across the inside waters, 10 to 15 knots. Look for 2 to 3 foot seas there and anywhere from 4 to 6 foot seas across the outer coast with that onshore flow about 10 to 15 knots. Look at this though, as you get into Saturday, small seas, light winds south of Sitka, a general southeasterly flow outside the Dixon entrance. Winds stay fairly light on the inside. Southerlies in the northern Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3 foot seas, and we'll keep that light onshore push from Yakutat all the way into Cross Sound and Gustavus. 3 to 4 foot seas expected there for Saturday. Across south central, winds are fairly light for your Friday. Northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound and 2 foot seas there. Light southwesterlies inside of Cook Inlet. Small seas west of the Barrens and into Shelikof Strait. A northeasterly flow, 15 knots and 3 foot seas. 5 foot seas east of Kodiak Island. As we get into Saturday, though, you can tell some changes are coming in. That southerly wind is going to help move that moisture northward and increase the chance of rain in many locations. 10 to 15 knots for areas around Prince William Sound and outside across the northern Gulf, 10 to 15 there. 4 to 5 foot seas across the north and western Gulf and across Cook Inlet, anywhere from 3 to 5 foot seas. South winds and south and west of Kenai. 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. So winds and waves will be getting a little rougher there for any folks heading out in the fishing crew there for Saturday and Sunday. Look for southeasterly winds inside of Bristol Bay, 2-foot seas there for tomorrow. Southeasterlies also going strong across the southern Alaska Peninsula, 7 to 5-foot seas there on either side. Light and variable winds just south of Kodiak Island to Chignik. That picks up from a southeasterly flow on Saturday with 5-foot seas there. 7-foot seas continue down the coast, and winds and seas coming up inside of Bristol Bay for Saturday, so similar rules apply. Be careful as you head out on the water. 20 knots with a 4-foot sea on Saturday. Southeasterlies for the eastern chain, 25 to 30, 7 to 9-foot seas there. A south and westerly flow picks up for the central and eastern chain for Friday, and south and easterly winds 20 to 25 with seas as high as 10 to 11 feet to wrap up the week. As you get into Saturday, a westerly punch comes in, 15 to 20 knots, 20 to 25 across the Bering Sea coast, 20 to 25 across the Pacific coast, but with higher seas, 7 to 13 feet south of Adak and Atka for your Saturday. For the west coast, similar conditions to what we saw yesterday continue tomorrow. South and easterly winds there all the way up into St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots, all areas 6 to 9-foot seas. Expected for the region with 25 knots in southeast flow from St. Paul and St. George with an 8-foot sea in the region. For Saturday, winds and seas diminish just a little bit there, 15 knots from the south and east with a 5-foot sea. Southeasterlies come up the western coast, 25 knots, that'll continue, and 7 to 8-foot seas expected across the entire region, including St. Lawrence Island. Across the north slope, here's what we're talking about. The south and southwesterly flow up the Chukchi coast, 5 to 7-foot seas there on 25-knot winds. And here's that westerly wind, so a lot of the ice in this region is going to be moving around. 4-foot seas around the eastern Beaufort Seacoast for Friday. That'll continue into Saturday, but lesser wind and a northwesterly flow at 15 knots. Westerlies around Point Barrow, and southerly winds diminish across the Chukchi coast, but it continues from the south, so that warmer weather should continue to win the beginning part of your weekend. Here's a look at the forecast one more time. Showers and a few thunderstorms possible across the northern parts of south central and generally the eastern Alaska range. Most of the rain stays out of southeast tonight, but a cold front trying to work its way north from the north to the south across the Chukchi coast won't have a lot of impact tonight, but it will focus that southerly warm air a little bit further south and a chance of showers for many along the west coast. A new weather system in the west will creep eastward, pushing more southerly winds across the west coast. A break in the clouds for you tomorrow for the west, and showers and thunderstorms advance a little bit further southward tomorrow. Watch for a better chance of rain in southeast and south central as we move into the weekend. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.